Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing well. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great. Appreciate you stopping by, as today we had some interesting fodder around the Miami Heat, and particularly their coaching staff. I do think that the Miami Heat fan got a little titillated today, briefly. But there was a report today that came out from Eurohoops that said the Miami Heat had an interest, and somebody even said that they were flying in for an interview. Sergio Scariolo, who is currently the Spanish national coach. He was a former assistant with the Toronto Raptors. Did win a championship. He was on the Kawhi team, Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry of that fame. Has also been an established coach on the international scene. Won Eurobasket, I believe, in 2022. But there was some talk, or there was some belief that the Miami Heat were bringing him in to potentially add to the staff. So this kind of led to a couple of other thoughts that everybody had in the middle of the day was, oh, okay, so is the Chris Quinn thing moving further along? Because are they just going to add, or are they just going to add him into the fold? Who's to say, who's to know? So as I'm doing the radio show today, probably around the 1 o'clock hour, Shams comes out and he says that the Suns job, there was a report earlier in the week from, I believe, John Gambadoro from Phoenix fame, that the Miami Heat, or that the Phoenix Suns were going to pick their coach sometime this week. And then it was reported today by Shams that the Suns are narrowing their choice down to two coaches, neither of them being Chris Quinn. He said the Phoenix Suns have narrowed their head coaching search to two finalists from the Cleveland Cavaliers, associate coach Johnny Bryant and assistant Jordan Ott. Both Bryant and Ott will meet with Matt Ishbia, Josh Bartelstein, and general manager Brian Gregory in Michigan later this week. This group was of approximately 8 that they interviewed of candidates. That included Ott, Miami's Chris Quinn, Dallas's Sean Sweeney, Oklahoma City's Dave Bliss, and current staff member David Fizdale. Suns franchise cornerstone Devin Booker has also been involved in the search process over the past 7 to 10 days. So we get word today, Chris Quinn, he's out of the running. Which I will say, just as an aside, I kind of feel like most people feel like it's going to go to Jordan Ott, because it feels much like the Knicks are in the ilk of Little Villanova. It feels very much like the Suns are going into the mix of Little Michigan State, and Chris Quinn being a Notre Dame guy. Don't know if that's going to go over there with their little powwow. But once again, appears that Chris Quinn is going to get passed over. Last year, I believe he was in the Lakers running. Of course, that was all kind of a shamockery because that was going to go to podcast boy JJ Redick. This was another one where it feels like he has gotten in the mix, but it feels like it's leaning which way. And I will say, there's a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of, I briefly have looked over some mentions on Suns fans that feel like they don't know how much they love all of the enabling that is going to go on with Matt Ishbia, because his decisions haven't necessarily worked out for the best so far for the Suns. So the fact that they're going to put even more people enabling him around is not the best. I think in the long run for Chris Quinn, you would have loved for him to get an opportunity like that, especially with an owner who would spend a lot of money. But it sucks for him that once again, maybe there was just another favorite that they were going to get to know other people, but he's not there in the fold. So we're all sitting here thinking for a couple of hours, we're like, okay, so are the Heat looking at Sergio Scariolo and being like, all right, we need somebody here to replace Chris Quinn, to shake up the coaching staff, because the Miami Heat have a habitat right now in their coaching staff of a lot of guys who are of the Heat ilk. Like they are guys who have been in the organization. The coaching staff, including Chris Quinn, Malik Allen, Caron Butler, Octavio De La Grana, Eric Glass, Wayne Ellington, and then their development coaches along with that. So what was the point of bringing Scariolo there? Now, I don't believe he has a current club professionally that he's under contract with. I think that is up. So he may just be looking for a gig. I don't know. But there was another chapter to this that was added because Anthony Chang of the Miami Herald did some digging on this and did a report and had a report today in the Herald. It said, in addition to Eurohoops report Monday about the Heat expressing interest in adding Scariolo to its coaching staff, who began his coaching career in the home of Italy, is currently coaching Spain's national team and serving as an assistant coach with the Toronto Raptors. But a source close to the Heat denied that report, stating that Scariolo is not a candidate for a Heat coaching position. The Heat finished, and then, gives the Heat's record. So Anthony's source is saying not true, that he's not a candidate. Bit of an odd report to come out of nowhere from Europe. Now, not the first time that I think the Heat have tried to get a wrangle on some international reports beforehand, which not here to give validity because Anthony's about as credible as they come with this stuff. I mean, him and I do a tremendous job. Tim, they do a great job of getting the inner workings of the team. It's an interesting thing that it's there just flatly a day in. Like, no, not true, not a candidate. So where does all this stuff come from? It could just be something that was thrown out from their end because, maybe he's looking to get his name out in the ether of, oh, yeah, I'm a candidate for this because he's looking for a gig. I don't know. But I will say everybody who heard this was kind of in on the idea of like the Heat bringing in somebody new. And so with Scariolo, you're like, we're all, fiending for, what's his background? Where does he come from? What's he got? Does he have plays? Does he have trick plays? What does he have? Because I think the Heat fan feels like the things are in a bit of a rut right now. And I think to me speaks to just everybody's thirst to wanting something new. Whatever that may be. Just everybody's looking for just a little jolt, a little something, even something as nominal of like as an assistant coach. I was thrown against the wall the other day, just Hail Marying like Stan Van Gundy on the staff. Like, I get it, dude. Because we're all just looking for some little nibble, something that we could glam onto as hope that if the same ingredients are back, can there be something different with the chefs whipping stuff up? And so when this gets shot down mere hours after it's out there, I think the fans are like, oh, come on, man. And mind you, I didn't know one iota about this guy at all. I didn't know who the Raptors assistant coach was. Congratulations on all success. I don't mean that as a disrespect. I just think that any of us who knew who he was outside of maybe a few handful, we're fooling ourselves. We knew him for 15 minutes. So I'm not going to sit here and cry about it. But I do think it's interesting feeling the temperature of everybody in the early going. Be like, oh, what are we doing? We're going to Europe for that? That's different. We're just looking for something different. We're looking for something to hold on to. Be like, oh, Spo, he's broadening his horizons. And so to have that shot down immediately, like, oh, okay. So we're just, ribbit. Run it back. That's what I guess the Heat are doing here. Now, the other interesting thing with the Chris Quinn thing that I just wanted to touch on, it sucks for Chris Quinn that he's not getting a head coaching job. It's also been an interesting thing that why Eric Spoelstra's guys don't seem to get the opportunities is a very, very interesting thing, because I do think that, the Heat do give a lot of their coaching staff credit for the development programs that everybody's been through. Mind you, I'm talking about, Chris Quinn's been up for jobs the last couple of years. I know that the last couple of years have not been impressive because they've been first round exits. I'm talking about even after the finals years. You see guys on Brad Stevens' staffs get gigged. Greg Popovich has a heck of a coaching tree. You see other teams, their teams go far. OKC, Cavaliers, they have guys in the midst of this reporting as well. One of them is likely going to be a Cavaliers, although it may be more the Michigan State tie than it is the Cavaliers tie. But Eric Spoelstra's coaching tree is just like, it hasn't bared fruit on guys getting head coaching jobs, which is interesting. David Fizdale, which was 10 years ago, had the whole run-in with Marc Gasol, and they really haven't gone anywhere since with him. And then Juwan Howard got the Michigan Wolverines head coaching job, but of course he is of Fab Five fame, so I don't know how much necessarily was put into his time with the Heat there. Not nothing, but it's also not an NBA job. And it is an interesting thing. You remember Dan Craig being the lead assistant on the staff for many years, and then he eventually left. Recently, Anthony Carter left to go to Memphis, but it is interesting to see how this collective does under Eric Spoelstra hasn't seemed like it has bought you a lot. Now, it's not unique to Eric Spoelstra in sports. Bill Belichick did not have a great coaching tree. And sometimes I do think it can be a hindrance to people thinking like, oh, you're the guy next to the guy. You're not the guy. You don't really have anything on your own. I don't know if that's what's happening here with Chris Quinn. Quite frankly, I think Chris Quinn is deserving of a head coaching job. I think that, the last year it was such a sham with the JJ Redick thing, like so clear that, this was all a put on, but he's more qualified than JJ Redick is to coach. It's ridiculous. And the same thing here seems like it's an MSU tie. The other thing that's interesting, speaking of JJ Redick, I will say one place where LeBron does miss him is as a podcast host, because I watched this Steve Nash, Luka, LeBron podcast. I was not feeling good this weekend, as you can hear a little bit in my cough. So I'm sitting here, I'm like watching, and I'm like, oh, what's up on my YouTube page? LeBron, Luka, Steve Nash. I can throw this on for an hour. There's got to be something of it that's got to be of interest, right? Holy crap, when I tell you this was maybe the most boring podcast of all time. And I really have to sit here and if I had to blame anybody, I have to blame Steve Nash. I don't know if it's tone. I don't know if it's topics. I don't know. Steve Nash does not have, and I think he's going to be a broadcaster on Amazon, I think. This dude is lacking pizzazz, dude. Because how do you have LeBron James and Luka and make me want to watch paint dry rather than listen to this podcast? I know Luka's not like the most animated voice in the world, and LeBron, you certainly know everything's going to be buttoned up, but I'm sitting here and I'm listening to these guys. I'm like, this is the most boring podcast known to man. This is horrible. They're getting nothing. We're talking about like, all this nonsense, and I'm like, hey, Steve, not for nothing, podcast. I know it's part one. Typically, you want to put in your podcast the most interesting thing right off the bat. I think they said it was a two-parter. I don't know. We're not having him here to talk about the biggest trade known to man. We're here to talk about his opinion on, God knows what, youth sports. I know he's got a foundation, but I was like, they didn't even make that interesting. So anyway, maybe hire Chris Quinn for the Lakers job and put JJ Redick back in the podcast booth. That's all I'm saying. But Heat fans were even like pissed that this was, that Anthony's report comes out and said that this is like, whoa, come on. We know nothing about Scariolo. He could be a tremendous coach. I watched a podcast of him today. I was like, this guy seems cool. I especially liked him talking about his time with the Raptors because he was talking about how he could just deep dive into basketball. Like it wasn't dealing with the agents. It wasn't dealing with the complaints. You could just dive into the game. And I was like, that, if anything spoke to me, I was like, oh, that's something. Now, it says not for the coaching staff. Maybe they're looking at him for the front office. Could there be, does Scariolo, is there a possibility the Heat are looking for him for something, another ears and eyes that's in the scouting department, in the front office? I don't know. If you wanted to play semantic samurai with the denial in Anthony's report, but it also just could be hogwash. I don't know, dude. I just found it to be finally an interesting day of some actual stuff that's out there. But Chris Quinn, stick around. Selfishly, happy about it. I think Chris Quinn does a good job. And I also think that one thing Heat fans got to realize is, let's be real about this, guys. The Miami Heat, forever and thought of under Eric Spoelstra, have had the advantage of having the best coach in the game. And to think that you have the best coach in the game and that he doesn't know how to pick the right assistants is kind of counterintuitive. I don't understand why the groupthink around the league has been, we don't hire Spose guys. It's a little bit weird. I think it's almost kind of in the ilk of like, we're a little wary of signing Heat role guys because they just think it works in that ecosystem. But for the most part, that ecosystem has been beneficial to the team. If you don't think where the Heat are at right now is like a 90-10 talent coaching issue, I just think you're high as a kite. And while I was plenty critical of Spo this year, I still like Spo in the foxhole of running the organization, and I like the guys that he picks to go to battle with. So I do think we got to get a little bit more on the page of like, hey, they change the players, they change and fix the roster issues, the talent detriment that they have in certain spots. They got the right coaches that can get the job done. People will say about the offensive numbers, and I understand that, but let's also look at the guys that they've had. Like, they haven't had a 25-point score since LeBron. So have they had the talent to be there? Because coaching-wise, they've been able to unlock some undrafted guys. And you look at a guy like Davion Mitchell, who's never thought of as a three-point specialist. All of a sudden, Davion Mitchell's shooting just under 40%. So shoot just under 50% from three. I do think that also has to be credited to coaching in some regards, that they can unlock elements of that. I'm not saying there's no validity to your complaints because everything's on the table with 37 wins, but the shuffle isn't necessarily the number one thing for me. That to me has to happen on the player roster, not necessarily the coaching. Because forever and for always, we've usually trusted Spo. And we've trusted the guys that Spo chooses to go to battle with. And that includes Chris Quinn, who's been, his associate head coach, right-hand man, and Caron Butler, who, is not just, was not just a talented player in his own right, but was an all-star player, is kind of a worldly guy who has a lot of knowledge in a lot of places. And I think Malik Allen did wonders with Khalil Ware in a lot of places this year. I don't know, man. Like I think there's a lot of good on that staff. I do. But I understand there's nothing not exciting about new and wanting something new to feel like it's going to mix up the concoction a little bit here. So I get it. I'm hopping on and watching podcasts and reels of this guy's plays that he's drawn up as well. I'm just as guilty of it. But I don't think it's A1, number one, the biggest thing that's going to get this thing fixed either. That to me is going to come with them shuffling the deck with the players.